tree's down at the zoo stop. So maybe, and it's a huge tree, so maybe as it's falling, it just blew all over. I mean, the wind was nuts. But yeah, the street's closed over there.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's a little bit shorter of a drive from the weather, but it's supposed to be really good. I'm trying to time it. We made a mistake. They could do a nap in the car, which we refused to. So now we're back up before we drive back. That was actually the first time back.
Okay, is everybody ready? We'll get right into it. Wait a minute. Okay, we're going to get started. Good evening again. It's 7:16 p.m. on Monday, July 27, 2026. I'd like to call to order the Village of Brookfield Committee of the Whole meeting. Mike, can we have a roll call for the committee meeting, please?
Trustee Ketchmark.
Here.
Trustee Whitehead.
Here.
Trustee Hendricks.
Here.
Trustee Naramatsu.
Here.
Trustee Gilhooly, not present. Trustee Kaluzny.
Here.
President Garvey.
Here. Thank you, Mike. We have two items up to discuss tonight. The first, we have a very detailed memo again in our packet about discussion concerning the dormancy of the Beautification Commission. The Beautification Commission, as a very diligent commission, took the time to kind of a state of the commission review and had a meeting and discussions with staff liaison and Trustee Kaluzny, and there's a recommendation coming forward tonight. But at this point, I'm going to just turn it over to Noah, who's the staff liaison to the commission, for kind of a brief presentation summary of what is contained in the packet. And then with the board's indulgence, I'll open up to public comment. We have two members of the commission here tonight. I'd also like to give them a chance to say something, and Trustee Kaluzny, and then we can just talk our way through this. So Noah?
Thank you, President Garvey. Board trustees, thank you for this opportunity. So just a summary of what was in the previous packet. So on July 7th, at our last commission meeting, we discussed the future. So we discussed all the projects and events that the commission holds, and we brought up a few items, most specifically how that as of September, we'll only have two active members eligible left. Chairwoman Elaine Jans is not renewing her term. We want to thank her and every other commission member. There's a lot of great work that takes place. So when reviewing the commission and what it does, in the past recent years, there's been a lot of improvements and a lot of strides being taken, one of which is improvements within village processes. So previously work that was done by commissioners has now been able to be taken on by staff, or things that were solely done by the commission have been expanded to include public engagement with our garden and holiday decorations, which I'm happy to report that over 2,000 total votes have been cast since 2025. So it's been a great engagement as this initiative has taken place. We're here tonight to discuss the commission, what it does, how the commission has changed its responsibilities. Apologies. Again, the two commissioners are here tonight to answer any questions, and I'm also here to answer any questions you guys have as well.
Thank you, Noah. Trustee Kaluzny, did you want to add anything at this point?
Sure. I'd love to add a few things. Thank you, Noah. I have been the trustee liaison to this commission since I was elected to the board 7 years ago. So I've watched this commission evolve, and the commissioners that have come and gone from this commission all doing awesome stuff, including the two that are back there. And so it's been a commission that's been around for a long time, doing some projects that have lasted more than 30 years, like Project Nice, some newer initiatives that they've come up with even in the time that I've been the liaison. But a lot of those things, a lot of the cool things that they have done actually have received full grant funding and different ways to be improved by the village, which has led to kind of less projects that they've been taking on. And so it seemed, as Noah mentioned, there's some terms that are expiring, some terms that aren't renewing. Before we recruit new individuals to join and appoint to this commission, that we needed to take a look at what the functionality of this commission is moving forward, and what the direction of the board is for this commission. Per the ordinance language, it's kind of a little vague, like what they could be doing. And so looking for some direction in our conversation tonight about how to either think about the future, or put that into dormancy until we have time to reconsider that, and then recruit commissioners to whatever that new goal might be. But again, we have some commissioners here tonight that I'm sure might want to weigh in on that too, or maybe not, I'm not sure.
I will, with the board's indulgence, I'll give the commission members an opportunity. Elaine and Steve, would you, either both of you like to say something, or? If you would like to, you don't have to. I mean, you have obviously been a big part of the commission and involved.
I did
Well-
recruit Elaine in the middle of Tischler's to join the commission.
Classic Kaluzny move.
Thank you for saying yes.
Elaine Jans, 4318 Raymond. I want to make it clear, this was not an easy decision. Personally, I was not renewing my term because I know I'm the oldest person in this room, and I've reached a point where I'm like, I'm going to do other things. I've loved the 6 years I've been on the Beautification Commission, but things have evolved. I partially blame Public Works, who does an amazing job of I cannot believe how it's evolved from the time I've lived here over 35 years. How beautiful everything's kept, how clean everything is, and probably part of the community sees that and joins in. So it's cut back some of we stopped doing the Project Nice in October already before. I personally went around this Project Nice in May to the spots that the Public Works recommended, and I was hard pressed, to find a lot of stuff to do. So again, God bless the Public Works. They're doing an amazing job here. You've got an easy job over there. And then we came up with the brilliant idea of having we used to do all we used to go around and do the garden, look at the gardens, and look at the holiday, and look at the Halloween, and we came up with a brilliant idea to let the community nominate themselves and vote, and they love it. I know Noah's got great statistics, but then we put ourselves out of that job. We used to do the planters on Grand, and the village did an amazing job there. They don't need that. So we've struggled as, what need is there for us? And we're, and again, that's why we wanted to be dormant, though, because something could come up and we could resurrect it. But again, this was not an easy decision. We're sorry to have to look at this, and we've all been happy to support this, but that's where we stand.
Thank you. And as I said earlier, thank you for being sometimes you get caught up in the day-to-day and just keep going and doing things, but for you to take a step back and see where the commission is and have the long-term planning approach is really appreciated. And you're everywhere, you do everything. I appreciate all you do and the time you've given, and you have no apologies necessary for you stepping back. I know you're not going to be staying at home. I know you'll just be doing something different.
Yes, I'll do some other things.
But, and I wholeheartedly agree with, your sentiments that Public Works is tremendous and has stepped up. But I also want to give a lot of credit to the commission and the commission members, because I think what has happened also is you've raised awareness and thoughtfulness about beautification in general, and maybe, just maybe, because of your work, people are more careful about what they do with village property and spots and garbage and everything else, and just, so I think while Public Works, I agree wholeheartedly, has done a tremendous job. I think the education campaign and just your awareness, the way you've done things, the visibility has maybe just made Brookfield a more beautiful place through your efforts like that.
The community has stepped. My husband and I, some years ago, we walked in Ellard Park, and we'd carry, plastic bags and fill them up. Can't do that anymore. People are far more responsible. All the sport teams and that, they keep everything clean. It's great.
I think, again, it's part of the education and the mindset people have changed. And I was talking to Trustee Kaluzny about this, things have changed. Meet the Creek truly used to be a cleanup event where I remember the first year we went in the creek and never got past the Washington Avenue Bridge. We spent 6 hours in the water picking out garbage, and now Meet the Creek, fortunately, is now more of a enjoy the creek as opposed to clean up the creek, because I think we cleaned it up and educated people not to dump things in the creek. It's not a dumping area, and treat the creek like the asset that it is. And I think you've done the same thing with a lot of the public areas and stuff, and your partnership with Public Works. So truly appreciate your input on this. I mean, if you're going to stick around, I mean, the board members may have questions as we go through this, but I wanted to
Well,
give
yeah.
you and Steve a chance to say a few words.
And again, I appreciate, it was a pleasure to serve this for 6 years, and thank you, Katie, for grabbing me into it. I appreciate it.
No problem. I'll get you to do something else. Don't worry.
Yeah, you'll find something else for me.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Elaine.
Elaine.
Steve, would you like to say anything?
I actually don't have anything to add, because I think Elaine really encapsulated everything along with Katie and Noel. But it really has been a pleasure to serve with the commission, and I still have other commission duties. So I'll be keeping busy there as well.
Exactly. You, the same people, you were always around also, so thank you, Steve. Okay, I'll open it up to questions, comments, guidance from the board, which direction you want to go, that type of thing.
I can just add a couple of other items for historical knowledge. And this dates back before me. There also used to be a nonprofit, like a 501c3 portion, which I think was covered in the memo too, that Noah put together, called Beautify Brookfield, which was raising money from different things like the duck race. The duck race used to raise money through beautification to then fund art, community art projects. Before that kind of evolved, and the board members of that 501c3 moved on as well, and the duck race then got moved to Parks and Rec, which is awesome. You stole it. Thank you for doing that. We had all the ducks. So that was another piece that the commission used to do even before my time on the commission, was working on community art pieces. We did several years ago put mural, like community and business murals, as a vetting process that this commission would do. Unfortunately, we have not had but one application that came forward and then was rescinded. So that has not become a function of this commission to date either, even though that was an intention to add another component here. But just wanted to share those other couple of items that were proposed or passed things as well.
I think this has been a commission of evolution over several decades. I think this started out as the Recycling Commission in the 90s, that then became the Conservation Commission. And then members of Conservation had different ideas or expertise that they brought to the table, and some wanted to be more the conservation angle, some wanted to be more the beautification angle on it. So I think this just kind of continues the evolution. I like the idea of it going dormant for now. Maybe there's a way to resurrect this in another form, as it's kind of been resurrected over decades. But there's been changes and a lot of positive things that have been accomplished on it. Thank you to all of the commissioners over all the years that have put in so much time on this. But I think keeping it just dormant for now is a good idea. And not dissolving.
Your historical perspective is right on, and it's very good. I mean, you talk about all the volunteer, Barb Dom, who's always at the village, but I think she was a member of the original Recycling Commission, and Dorothy Ball and a few people, and then it's just evolved and changed.
And if you think about that, we have trash pickup each week, and it's divided into recyclables and non-recyclables. That started with a push from that commission.
Exactly.
Getting us to start recycling here in town.
Yes, yes. Other comments from the board?
I'm curious, you brought up the murals. Do we need a new process if a mural application were to come through?
We would need to probably come up with a new way to handle that, but the commission isn't necessarily going dormant as of today. They still plan to meet at their September meeting. Everyone agreed to still have a September meeting if we wanted to have that, to kind of close things out / maybe have a party. I don't know. But I think, this dormancy, and the reason we had this discussion at this time is to think about also before the budget workshop and budget comes up for 2027, this commission does normally have a budget and some certain things that happen there, and we'd want to have that conversation before that and where those items would go, including some of those processes.
If I may add, regarding processes, so the PIP project, that was amended to include murals, so that is something new. Depending on what the board goes with, we would have to amend the code and redesignate the assignment of the mural projects, and that was created. It was put in an ordinance. So you'd have to find a commission to assign that to. But yeah, no, that's the one person who did come. It was proposed. They were funded privately by this grant, and then unfortunately the timing didn't line up, despite our efforts to make a special meeting. Unfortunately, but those are the latest updates regarding murals. So.
And I know we need to, if the board chose to go the dormancy route, we would need to pass an ordinance to do that. I know with that same ordinance need to address the murals or other things, or is it just that, and then we brainstorm and staff, and I don't know, that's part of the budget workshop or budget process, or just ideas coming forward about what the commission can be going forward, separate from the budget process. Do we need to do all that at one time?
I mean, the commission had a discussion about amending the code to remove it altogether versus going dormant. I don't know what the requirement would be to be dormant versus like gone altogether.
If I may. The code right now states that the commission meets on certain months of the year. So at the very minimum, to be dormant, we would just pass an ordinance canceling the meetings for the foreseeable future, similar to when we cancel a board meeting for throughout the year. But what it sounds like is you probably need to move some things around in your village code, which could be done by ordinance. It doesn't all need to be done at one time. It's just it needs to be done prior to it being needed to be changed by the village. So it could be one large ordinance, postponing, canceling meetings for the foreseeable future, and moving some obligations around in your village code language, and it can be revisited as needed.
And would that be permissible language of the foreseeable future, or do we have to specify a certain number of meetings aren't going to take place, or?
I think that we can make it foreseeable future, that it does not need to be, the beautification meeting shall be dormant and shall not meet contrary to what is provided in the village code until further authorization from this village board to reconvene the beautification commission.
Okay.
Yeah, I also agree with the suggestion of dormancy. I think I appreciate that the commission has come forward and Noah has come forward and Trustee Kaluzny have come forward with this question, because I think we should be consistently evaluating the roles of our various commissions and how they're adding value to how the village is operating. You know, when I think about how these commissions can add the most value, it's really advising staff and village board on decision making and how to best invest public resources. I think the commission is representatives of members of the public and people who have deep knowledge and expertise in whatever issue. And in this case, you know, with so much of the Beautification Commission's responsibilities being onboarded by staff, I mean, I think that's appropriate, right? I think we should have staff, you know, helping with the planters and cleaning up the parks, and I'm really pleased that Public Works has stepped up in such a way. So therefore, you know, they seem to have, you know, diminished their own relevancy because of their success around education. But, you know, maintaining these commissions, I know, is a significant staff time among their many other responsibilities. So, you know, this comes up sometimes in our Parks and Rec discussions too, which I know, you know, our own Parks and Rec commission was a combination of a previous events commission, right? So planning and zoning has a very clear and I think official role in terms of decision-making process and how they are helping inform our decisions. But the other commissions, I think that's a little more vague, right? So to the extent we can have conversations like this, I'm not saying we need to send more commissions to dormancy, but I think the commissions themselves and the village staff and the village board should be revisiting these questions of how we're best using these commissions and how we're making sure that we're making the best use of the residents' time who is involved. I know just in the time I've been on Parks and Rec, I've gotten varying levels of feedback in terms of the utility of the commission. So I'm grateful we're examining that question here with beautification, and I hope in the future we'll talk about the role of commissions on some of these other issues.
I agree with you around the resident engagement piece too. I mean, it's great to have resident feedback. It's great to have residents engaged. I love working with volunteers. That's what I do by day also, and by night. And I think, you know, I also want to make sure it's a useful piece of residents' time. Yes. And so having meetings to have a meeting and not have much to discuss You know, part of volunteering also should bring you joy and have fun doing the things that you're doing, and not a ton of frustration. I think it's, you know, your free time and how you spend it. And so I want to make sure that we're continuing to provide that opportunity for residents to engage in a way that is beneficial for the village, but also is, you know, as fun as it can be doing public service.
I mean, it seems, anybody else want to add anything? I mean, it seems there's a clear consensus that supports the recommendation of the commission to go the dormancy route. I'm just, the timing of this, I anticipate in talking informally with board members and staff, we typically cancel one meeting in August. I think the consensus, it would be most beneficial to most board members if we canceled the second meeting in August, is what we determined. No, well, Tim, while you were gone, we changed our minds. You go out of town for a day and we change our minds. Typically, we would cancel the first board meeting in August to give the board members a chance to take break, family vacations, things like this, but based on work schedules and family schedules, it seems that either board members were neutral or the most request was to cancel the second meeting in August. So we would meet the second Monday in August and then skip the August 27th meeting, I think it is. As always, we would call a special board meeting if necessary. So do we?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned, we're still going to meet the first Tuesday of September. So if we didn't need to address it until even the September meetings, that's fine.
That's what I was going to ask. But I guess board members, commission members could read the tea leaves, and they know that their September meeting, after that, there probably would be action by the board to make it dormant after that. So if that's the consensus of the board or the intention of the board. So I'll work with staff for the scheduling of the ordinance to make it dormant and when it gets on the agenda. And then I just want to make sure that there's a process or some kind of timeline in place where we actually, you know, can talk about this or get staff input, your input, other members' inputs about how it can change, just so it's not just permanently dormant without either eventually, you know, remove it completely or evolve it and change it into something else. I just want to make sure there's some kind of process in place to do that, so. Okay? All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Elaine and Steve. Thank you to everyone on the commission for the thoughtful input. We'll move on to the second item now, which is a continued discussion regarding the financing of a Brookfield 25-year street and alley improvement program. Earlier tonight, we took a big step of placing language on the ballot for a referendum question at the November election that could result in additional funding for streets and possibly alleys. The last board meeting, there was a very good, long discussion about the alley process in the past and how it might look going forward if we had additional funding and what we might do. The board had some very thoughtful questions and requests. It's been so long since we've had some of these processes used, the special assessment process. The board members requested information about the current special assessment process, current alley construction cost estimates and homeowner costs, and participation levels in the special assessment program over the last 10 years. So we have a detailed memo in the packet that Doug Cooper, our finance director, prepared. Tim, are you going to take a lead on this initially? And then, okay, I'll just turn it over to Tim at this point.
Well, you pretty much just gave my entire presentation, but I will do my best. Yes, as President Garvey has referenced, you took an important step tonight in approving an ordinance that will actually set. We now know what the question will be asked to voters in November. There will be a referendum in November for the Village of Brookfield to, again, support and fund a legitimate and consistent and proactive roadway improvement program. So every year, the idea is every year we will have a set established process for improving roadways that will not require us to periodically go out and float bonds and go through financing efforts that we've been doing in the past. That's the goal of the referendum. To do so, as has been mentioned several times throughout the evening, we need to start a public education campaign. With us tonight is a representatives from Metro Strategies, our consultant firm. I thought it'd be important for them to be here as part of this discussion, and most importantly, to answer any questions board members may have. They will be helping us create, and have already helped us create, various pieces of information that we put in the newsletter, website, and so forth to help promote the referendum. As the board is aware, and as I think we all know, there are very strict legal requirements to what you can say and what you cannot say as a municipality sponsoring a referendum, and so they are here to make sure, and Adam, of course, is always here to make sure we don't step in hot water. As President Garvey said, there were three main questions that came out of last committee of the whole discussion, and that was to clarify what the current special assessment process is. That we do in effect have an alley program right now, and that program is a special assessment process. Included in your memo is a more detailed description of how that process works. Staff is here, and Derek and Dan from Hancock are here. We can answer any questions you may have regarding that special assessment process. The board also asked for alley construction costs. That's going to be part of this presentation in a few slides. The board also asked what has been the participation rate of our special assessment of our current alley program. That's also included in your memo. And the reality is there's only been 2 in the past 10 years, 2 blocks of alleys that got approved through the special assessment process where the residents in that particular block voluntarily did a petition. More than 50% said they were in support of paving the alley. They came forward and they did it. My understanding is prior to 10 years ago, participation levels were much higher. Staff can only surmise that construction costs and it's a high barrier. It's a very expensive process to pave, to take gravel alleys, convert them into what we call green alleys now, improve the drivability, improve the maintenance and the drainage of them. It's expensive, and so staff can only surmise that's why participation rates have been so low over the last 10 years. At any point during this presentation, please, if you have any questions, just interrupt me and I'd be glad to stop and answer your questions, or have staff answer your questions. Okay, you've seen this information before. This just summarizes what the referendum is designed to accomplish. We need about $2 million per year that would be available after a referendum is passed and after all of the existing bonds were paid off and weren't replaced by new bonds. We would take the money that's coming out of the tax levy currently to pay for those bonds. That money we would just funnel right into a road program, not pay legal costs, interest costs, and other debt issuance costs, and be able to funnel all of that money into a road program. Derek and Hancock have told us ideally what they would recommend is that we develop a 25-year road program. In other words, that would mean if this referendum passes and we have this funding source, every village-owned street would be improved at least once every 25 years. And again, as I understand, in years past, that was not always the case, which is why we were kind of forced to go in the years past into debt financing in order to maintain our roads. So this would provide a mechanism where we would have a dedicated funding source to spend money on improving the roads up to the level, which is a very consistent level with most area communities. A 25-year road program is consistent with what most communities around us do. You've all seen this before, you know this already, but if you have any questions, please let me know. So it really comes down to, tonight's discussion is really around 2 central questions. We've already talked about alleys this evening. That was not planned. And the central questions are, should we include alleys, the establishment of a new alley program into the public education campaign that we would work with Metro on and work with staff on to get out into the public? And the answer can be no. I don't want to say that we have to include alleys. A no is a legitimate answer. If the answer is no tonight, that's fine. We will then pivot and work, not pivot, but we'll work and develop public education strategies that just focus on the roads, which is the lion's share of the money that we would get out of this funding source. If, however, the answer is from the board tonight is yes, that you would be interested in including alleys, and again, staff included alleys. After we've done some analysis, what we talked about last meeting, we do think that there should be about $800,000 left per year to devote to an alley program. So staff kind of thought, well, that'd be we know that alleys are an important need of the village. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, it is the #1 complaint of our residents, the condition of the alleys. This would allow us to start a program. Right now, we don't have a consistent program. Right now, we just wait, as I've said before, for residents to come forward and be willing to fund significant construction costs upfront. And the result, as I've said, has been 2 blocks of alleys in 10 years. So if the answer is yes from the board, we would work with various parties and develop a public education campaign to include alleys in the public education process for the bonds, or for the referendum, I'm sorry. I'm gonna turn over to Stevie. One of the questions that the board asked 2 weeks ago was asking clarification, what percentage of our residents and properties abut an alley? And Stevie has worked with MGP, our GIS company, and she's gonna provide that.
When asking the question about how many properties abut an alley, we broke down the data set into 2 scenarios. The first scenario on the left, that 68%, is all condos and multi-unit buildings counted as individual units. That means if there is a building with 8 units, those 8 units were counted separately as part of the abutment to the alley data. On the right, that 74%, you see as consolidated sites or consolidated buildings, even if it were a multi-unit. With 20 units, the building itself was counted as one parcel. The interesting glean from these 2 data sets, one, the individual units give you an idea of the voter impact, individual voter impact who will be responding to the question. So that data set kind of gives you a reality look into how many individual voters will be impacting this decision. As far as the consolidated sites, that is the data set that is most appropriate for this discussion. It is closely aligned with our current SA process in which a leased or rental property would not be responsible for the payment to the improvement. It would be the property owner only. And so that consolidated site is the data set that we kind of use to determine how many properties are abutted to a gravel or stone alley in the village. The next slide.
And Steve, if I could just stop, because just to clarify, so if a property abuts an alley, is not an alley, but has a driveway to the street, is that in the number of properties abutting it?
No, so we were very specific with this data, and in response to the questions posed last meeting, it does not include parcels that are not abutted to an alley. So these are the true addresses that would be expected to contribute to an alley abutment improvement.
Based on past process, like driveway, but if a house is in the middle of a block and they don't enter their garage through the alley, they enter a driveway, I mean, I guess some people would say they abut the alley because their property is against it, but it's not counted in this figure?
If their property does not abut, then they are not counted in this figure. If they are at a T alley, those are already calculated to a contribution within an assessment, but I would have to defer to a previous assessment for any T abutments.
Okay.
But I think, to your question, if they have an alley and a driveway, if they abut the alley, they abut the alley, so they're included, right?
I'm sorry, I have 2
Oh,
voices talking at the same time.
I think what President Garvey's saying is if someone abuts the alley and has a driveway, so they have 2 access points, if they're abutting the alley, they're still counted in these numbers, correct?
Okay,
Whether
that's
they
what
have
I-
a driveway or not.
Correct.
Okay. And again, these numbers were requested by the board, and I think they're very helpful, and oftentimes we have people say, like, well, I don't use the alleys in town, I don't want to pay for alleys, but everyone is a beneficiary of the alleys, even if it's not the alley on their block. I mean, garbage pickup and also police and fire use alleys to get through for various purposes. So I think in all scenarios, everyone benefits, kind of a public benefit in general to have the alleys done. So even if you don't particularly abut one, the alleys are village property. They're meant to, you might say, I never use Elm Avenue, but you might use Elm Avenue in emergency or something else in the same way. I think alleys benefit everybody and are accessible. You know, police and fire use them for things, so. But these are the figures the board asked for, and it's very helpful to see it this way.
Additionally, if you wanted to focus in on those consolidated alley abutments, this breaks down the type of material it abuts. So the breakdown is 80% of alley adjacent, and those are consolidated properties, are served by stone and gravel. So 80% served by stone and gravel. And the remaining materials were concrete, asphalt, and our green infrastructure alleys. This is the measure of properties adjacent, not the number of alleys or lane mileage. This is a good outlook of what is the makeup of our individual properties abutting alleys.
Any questions?
Jump in at anybody. It's helpful if the slides are up if you want to jump in at any point with questions or clarifications, so.
Could you remind me when we started doing green alleys? Was it just for those last two that were done, like in the most recent two?
2014, we did advanced auto, part of the development,
Mm-hmm.
then the two in 2018.
Okay, thank you.
So perhaps before I continue, I'll just stop and ask a question. Does the board want to include alleys as part of a referendum program? And if the answer is no, we can stop this presentation right now, because the rest of the slides really have to do with options that would involve alleys.
Can I ask, if we don't include it in the information campaign, it doesn't mean we can't use it for alleys, right?
Correct.
And whether or not we include it in the public information campaign does not, dedicate that $800,000 that had been identified, right? That would be a part of a budgeting process year to
Correct.
year. It's not,
We-
we're not making that decision now to set that aside for alleys, is that correct?
If we're not gonna spend that money on alleys, we think we can still do a 25-year road program. We'd come back to you probably at a budget workshop and define what we wanna do with that $800,000. We
Which,
could either speed up the road program, we could come up with other public infrastructure needs.
we've talked about some alleys, in TIF districts and elsewhere. Is spending that $800,000 per year contingent upon a certain number of blocks coming forward and agreeing? I guess it depends whether or not we do a cost share, but, or can we, or if we were to express a desire as a board to spend it on alleys, are we confident we could do that, or is it then dependent upon resident interest?
We completely backed into the $800,000 was not created or not put forth as that would be the amount of money we need to develop a 25-year alley program,
Yeah.
for instance. It was just roads are the priorities. We know, working with Derek and Dan, how much we would need per year to maintain a 25-year road program. What was left was $800,000. And then what we've talked about is, we've talked about the length of time that will take to, at $800,000 per year, plus what we think we'll get from TIF, plus what we think we can get from MWRD. It's a pretty long program to do all alleys. We think that if we developed an alley program, we would go after grants, we'd go after other things, we'd try to shorten that time period. But as we sit here today, all we presented is what we know. That's $800,000 plus TIF, plus MW. We just backed into that number. I'm sure Derek and Dan come up with, if we wanted to create a goal, an alley program that, create every 50 years and replace alleys, we could come up with that number, but we don't have the funding for that.
It would be bigger than.
It'd be big.
I mean, I think, it's a plan that's worked in other areas for us. We were successful in streets and collector routes because we have some money available to match grants and have projects ready to go. We've never had that with alleys. I mean, a lot of residents ask, why don't we take advantage of the MWRD programs and things like this? Because we haven't really had the match available. And while $800,000 is not, it's a lot of money, but it's not compared to what we need to do. I think that's like, you look at it as the seed money to get started. And then, future boards would have the next step would be the process of which alleys do you do first and all that. But there's plenty of alleys and opportunities to get started with when, and I mentioned before, certain alleys will stand out because they're TIF eligible, or there's a development tied in, and we have $800,000 of village money available. And when we go to our state and federal legislators saying, when they ask how can they help us, well, we have an alley program in place now. Can you get us a member initiative towards that? And the MWRD funding could do what we do in the other areas, leverage, when we do Brookfield Avenue, other things, we pay 20%, they pay 80%. If we have that match available, I think it allows us to, It is an incredibly long program, even under the best-case scenario, but if we don't get it started, I don't know who will, so.
I just have a couple of questions that build on Trustee Whitehead's, because I am not convinced yet that talking about the alley program in either scenario helps the education campaign. So whether we decide to do alleys or not, the 100-year version, I think, is getting, seems like yours would never get done. And the other version where you have to pay for part of it also doesn't feel like, if you're voting yes on a referendum and you have to then pay more money, then it kind of hurts the cost or the neutral piece of the messaging. So I guess my question to this group and the board is, could we still keep talking about how to use those funds, but does it need to be part of this communication? I don't know that it's I mean, I know that people are excited about alleys, but I don't know that the length and cost of this is gonna get them as excited as we think they might be.
I think we need to start somewhere on it. It is an interesting discussion if you go 50-50 or the village picks up 100%. One way gets it done quicker, one way makes it less expensive if the village is paying it all, I guess, in some regards. But echoing Trustee Klusny, Trustee Whitehead, I'm not sure that needs to be part. We can have this exact same discussion with the same dollar amounts, separate from trying to use that to educate people to pass the referendum. The streets are priority. If the referendum question doesn't pass, we still need to start an alley program, but we don't have the funding for it. If we bring that into the discussion, the education about funding the streets, I think that convolutes everything tremendously. As I mentioned earlier, the question in itself isn't really clear. I think we're talking about that. We've been talking about this for the last several years because the bonds are rolling off and we can replace payments for the bonds with this. That's where we can say it's tax neutral. That takes a little discussion, a little education to make that point. Now we want to bring alleys into it as well. As you can see, the discussion we have on the alleys, there's a lot of different directions that goes into. But it doesn't seem like that needs to be part of getting people to support the limiting rate increase. It's separate from that. And I think by convoluting it with the alleys, we could say people would say they're not going to vote for it. Whether it's they don't want to split the cost of their alley, or I paid for my alley, why should I pay for it? I mean, that brings other things into the question which don't need to be brought into the question, I think. Because if the question doesn't pass, the rest of this is a moot point.
And to your point, if the referendum question doesn't pass, not only will we not have an alley program, we'll have to find another way to fund street improvements. And
Absolutely.
we know we need, and I think everyone on the board agrees that the streets are a higher priority than the alleys, although the alleys are a big priority. We've invested a lot of money over the past decade plus to get the streets to where they were. You know, Tim started his presentation saying that in the past, roads, Hancock's recommending a 25-year road program, and that's not what happened in the past. We were probably on a 50-year road program, or if that, in terms of streets getting improved, 50-plus years before they were improved. So we weren't even close to 25 years. So, the point's well taken that the streets are the priority. And as we discussed last meeting, where we had to decide between, it was like the lesser of two evils in deciding the language on the ballot. Both of them were extremely convoluted language, and I think sometimes voters are suspicious when you put language on there like we're trying to be. That's the mandated required language, and one option had different language, and there were, so we chose what we thought is the lesser of two evils to make it simple, to put it out there, what we were asking for. But I understand your point that adding alley education to it does maybe make things more complicated, so.
I think at previous meetings, we heard that the staff recommendation as a result of conversation with the consultants was to include the alley information, that it would strengthen the education campaign. I'm wondering if, does anybody want to add more detail or the reasoning behind that? So,
Either, where would you,
You go here or there.
thank you so much for being here this evening.
Of course. Thank you, President Garvey and trustees for having me. My name is Jordan Rogalski, and as Mayor Weiberg may have said, I'm with Metro Strategies Group. It's a pleasure to be here. In response to your question, Trustee Whitehead, yes, upon initial conversations with village staff and village engineer, we thought it would be beneficial to have that, given that it is a top item of concern that your staff, and I'm sure you folks hear as well, but understanding that it is something that you folks know your constituents and what may work better for them, will defer to you folks. We can explain anything in an education campaign and wanting to make sure that it's as clear as possible. But I would say, just that was our initial recommendation, just based on the data that we had heard from your staff to include it.
yeah, thank you. That's helpful. Yeah, and I share Trustee Ketchmark's concern in terms of, if we want to have a clear and transparent education campaign around the referendum, the bulk of the money, the vast majority of the money is going to the road program, right? And even if we were to include education on the alley program, then there's a lot of additional context that needs to be added there. They need to be able to understand the special assessment process. They need to be able to understand the cost and what that means for their individual home based on their placement in the alley, in terms of understanding how that will impact them as a resident. So my concern is if we include the alley program as a sweetener, as an encouragement for people to consider as they're voting on the referendum, is that we may be raising people's expectations for how soon their alley would be paved and how much it would cost to them. So I worry that we might be creating challenges in the future in the event the referendum were successful. People are expecting, well, within the next few years, that means my alley's going to be paved, right? Well, not necessarily, right? And actually, there's A, B, C, and X, Y, Z that you and your neighbors still have to go through. So,
Just to clarify,
Yeah.
though, not if the village was going to fund, remember, one of the options is 100% village funding. There would be no resident initiation there. There would be no special assessment process.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. But although we still have the issue of a even lengthier timeline in that case, and then we have to explain a prioritization process for why your alley is getting touched in 2 years, but your alley is getting touched, if no new funding, in 96 years, right? So I appreciate that clarification, but yeah, I think both options still present significant challenges.
If we don't mention it though, and we're asking for $2 million, right? That's an overestimate of what we need for our 25-year road maintenance program, correct? Or are we gonna have to explain, or are we gonna have to reduce the amount we're asking for?
The question allows for any municipal need, so our education and priority is a road improvement program. The remaining amount left beyond the 25-year contribution can be used primarily for roads, and we add to it. Or, as Tim mentioned, it's just part of the budget annual process to identify how we're utilizing those and for what municipal need. I'd like to insert here, just for consideration and in staff discussions previously, we've had a couple meetings where we identify this alley funding program as a sweetener to this referendum. And while identifying another public need as part of this can only help the question, not hurt, we did identify alleys. And comprehensively in our capital needs, our large capital needs, pending in the next few years, we have a sustainable road improvement program where we've identified a way to capture $2 million that we're not paying off in debt through bonds annually. So we've identified a way where we can capture those funds without raising our tax contributions from our residents. So that's $0, that's that tax neutral outcome. We have other capital needs pending. Alleys are one of them, just long-term, that's a big one. And we have a pending community center that the community and the board has expressed a desire to support and want to bring to fruition. The building of that community center will not happen without large capital funds to construct. So in the full scope of the considerations, not only will identifying another municipal need by residents help the question, not hurt, but in comparison to what we will be asking the residents to do, which is increase their taxes if a community center still wants to be built in just 2 to 3 short years, we are thinking of a way to become more responsible to our infrastructure on the village behalf, i.e. either 50% contribution or 100% funded alley improvements. Because when we come to 2 years from now, we are going to ask them if they want to raise their taxes to build this thing we've expressed a desire to have. And so at this point, it's above a sweetener to a question. It really is about what is the comprehensive, strategic way to take ownership of our infrastructure, relieving the burden on the taxpayer pocket, while still giving the most amount of quality life benefit, infrastructure, rec, community center, not to mention our other municipal needs within there. So I did want to insert that for consideration because it is beyond just, adding this to improve a question potential. It really is a bigger scope in the strategic, outlook of our finances.
But
So I
we're
just
not,
wanted to add that.
we're not relieving the tax burden on the residents. Our whole pitch is we're not increasing it. We're gonna keep it at this level, it's revenue neutral. So why shouldn't we use as the education process that it's for infrastructure? It's for streets and alleys.
That's what I'm reading the slide, I think that's the first level, right, the most.
But not going into detail. I mean,
Right.
why,
That's what-
we're gonna try to figure out amongst us, and then we're gonna try to educate the public on 50-50 or why it's better the village to do the whole 100%, and it's actually less costly. Picture trying to educate the public on that portion of it. Why do we need to do that? Okay, the referendum is going to infrastructure, it's going to streets and alleys.
I think
Well,
Derek
there's
brought
no,
up a while ago.
without, so what's on the screen now is kind of a generalized step level of information to put into an education campaign. So if you do too little, you're definitely not overpromising. You're not saying something you're gonna do and not do it, but it's not useful information to make a decision by the voter. If I'm a voter and I hear, we're gonna use this for roads and alleys, probably. That doesn't give me confidence in knowing that I want to support or not support something. So if we move over to the next step, it kind of increases the information without going into specificity in how we're prioritizing and the details of year-to-year funding structure. What that level 2 baseline does is state, if there is consensus, we will be using the remaining funds for seeding an alley program. The next important part is at what impact to the taxpayer? Are they going to still expect to contribute as part of that? Or is the village saying, and it will be completely on the village? We can't promise you for how long, but that is how we are going to start a seed program at no cost to you, because remember, in 2 years, we are asking for a cost to them. So the information of this, if it's too little information, leave it out. It's not going to benefit the tax voter. If it is too much information, well then, we've got to keep on discussing that and keep it out of the campaign altogether until we figure out those details.
I think our big sales pitch should be, we're keeping your taxes at the same level. I really think that.
And that's absolutely an option here.
But
We really
because-
do want
because
to make the best.
If the limiting
campaign.
question doesn't pass, the discussion on the alleys is totally moot. If it does pass, we continue the exact same discussion we're having now and figure it out. It's still not gonna be a 10-year alley program or a 20-year alley program or anything like that.
Well, there's a little more figured out if we're going to say alley contribution. We do need to identify in what way, if it's going to be included. If
But
we
you-
can't, because it's a lot of information, a lot.
Exactly.
If we can't, then
And
we
you're adding an
remove it
extra level.
entirely.
You're adding an extra level to a resident deciding whether what they want to support the limiting rate increase. Because it's not just that question, it's that question, and then all of a sudden, well, okay, the alleys are part of this, and whatever we come up with, do we want to pay 50/50? Do we want to vote for this? Yes, it's less costly if the village does it all. There's just a whole nother level to getting that passed, and I'd just be concerned that that gets the initial question, gets in the way of the initial question not passing.
I would like to agree with you. I think that, and with Trustee Whitehead, I think that if we have the 50/50 program, I think that that does complicate things way too much, and I don't think, I think it makes me concerned that it's not going to pass. But I also really appreciate staff's report and staff's memo, and I 100% agree with staff's recommendation, which is 100% funding of a seed alley program. It, just like what Stevie said, it's what the residents are always asking for. And I don't know how we go for a referendum in a few years for a rec center if we haven't come up with a beginning of an alley program. And if we push this through with this $2 million referendum and this $800,000 sitting out there that we don't have earmarked for this program, that's troubling to me, because now where is that $800,000 going? If it's not going to the alleys, I think we're missing a huge opportunity to satisfy our residents and to further the potential for success of a community center referendum.
I agree with you. I think either way, whether we add it to the education program or not, I agree with the 100% coverage of the village and not complicating the 50/50. If that's something we need to figure out in a future date to make alleys go faster, I don't think it needs to be part of this conversation. So I just don't know if it helps or hurts the campaign to talk about it, knowing the length of time and explaining the prioritization, like how someone gets prioritized over that 100 years.
Is that the staff recommendation, to option 2 in terms of the village covering 100% of the cost? I know the staff recommendation mentions with no cost to residents at this time. Or is the staff recommending that if we move forward with the inclusion of the alley and then we choose a no-cost share option? Or are you saying no cost to residents at this time because the overall question still remains revenue neutral, and then it's, contingent upon the special assessment process?
Bearing in mind, again, the reason those alleys even came up was I thought that this would help push residents towards support of a road referendum. With that said, the 50%, as several of you have mentioned, it complicates matters. What have we learned in the last 10 years? There's been 2 blocks in 10 years done.
Right.
People aren't, even at 50%, I have a slide that shows there's still a pretty significant investment that residents have to pay. Be about, for a 15-foot long lot, it'd be about $14,000.
Yes.
Will that be enough to incentivize residents to want to support the principle of that, or even support the outlay? Probably not. You go with 100%, and the resident, I get it done for 0. That's enough to entice them to want to vote for the road referendum, is the only reason why I support the 100%. And I think it's simpler. The village has complete control. Under 100%, the village controls what are our priorities. We can work with our engineers, we can work with Public Works, probably start in the business districts, probably which alleys are used most routinely and which are the worst. You can have a legitimate, objective process to prioritize alleys. 50%, we're completely at the whim and mercy of who comes forward with a petition. Maybe there'll be a lot, maybe there'll be very few. And then if there's very few, what have we gotten? We're still dealing with mostly gravel alleys.
But I think the problem there is if people, and I know there will be people that will analyze it that way, well, I wouldn't do it at 50%, but if I'm getting it 100%, anyone that looks at it that deeply is also going to be smart enough to realize, well, if I've got it at 50%, I have a much better chance of getting it more than less than 96 years away. Some people realize that if we go to 100%, it pushes the whole program out. And I think the thing that I'm hearing from the board is, I think this board, as we sit here today, would be committed to using the money for the streets and then seeding the alley program going forward. And we could make that promise, but correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, a future board could say those funds that we got from the street program could be used for something else. The $800,000 that this board wanted to use for a startup alley program could be diverted to something else, and that would be their prerogative as elected officials. They could do that. So hearing that we're all in favor of doing that, and I guess we can make a commitment to doing that, I understand Trustee Ketchmark's point, and I wasn't shocked by the consultant's recommendation that you explain what you would do in terms of an alley program, but it's sort of looking at it in a vacuum, because in general, if we have never done any alleys and we have no alleys done, should we start an alley program? Everyone in the village would probably agree we should start one. But the complicating factor is there are people that don't have alleys. There are people that have paid for their alleys over the years. There's probably some people still paying for their alleys. So in isolation, it looks like a good idea to say, yes, we're going to start an alley program. This is how it's going to work. But in terms of getting the big picture, the question voted on by the voters and passed and supported so we can have the money for the streets and then have the opportunity going forward. I think I agree with Trustee Ketchmark that it's not necessary. It would be ideal if you could fully explain this is how the program's going to work. But I always didn't like the term sweetener on it because I don't think it's, and I understand Stevie's point and recommendation that it might get them to vote if they know there's going to be an alley program, but there are some people that will vote against it because some of their money will be going to pave alleys when they already paid for their alley and they don't have an alley, etc. The board, if the referendum passes, this board and whatever future board is sitting up here could have the public discussion of, we have approximately $800,000 a year that we want to put into an alley program. Have the meeting, have the public, this is what we're talking about tonight, how the program's going to go forward. I think we get a lot more input and ideas about going forward with it from there.
I have deferred to the village attorney, but what if the board, to tie a future board's hands, as what President Carvey suggested, a resolution or an ordinance that this board adopted, you can't violate an ordinance. So
No, you can't violate an ordinance, but what I could foresee happening is another board passing
Changing
a
it.
different one, repealing, amending, or something. I can't think of a situation where this money could be put in a lockbox via the village code or an ordinance or a resolution.
Which is, I think, one of the reasons that we want it to be in the referendum education, because it gives some accountability. It makes us accountable for where that money is going, because we have told all of the residents that we are seeding this money.
And I agree with that, and I understand that, but many of us won't be up here in 2 years or 4 years when the money starts to come in, and the promise that we made and the commitment we made to do this program. And it should be the prerogative of the future boards, because right now, we could say that any future board would be irresponsible if they didn't take the $800,000 left over and use it towards alleys. But who knows what a future board may face, what type of other unfunded mandates might come forward, what other economic downturn or situations happen where that money have to be something else.
But President Garvey, by that argument, you could say that this future board could take all of that money and spend it somewhere else and not use it on the streets at all.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that that's an argument that's going to sway me, at least.
Okay.
And I just want to, and to your earlier point, I've heard people bring this up over and over and over again, that people are going to come out and say, I paid to pave my alley. So I don't want anybody else to get an alley for free. I did pay for my alley. I do want to have them paid for, but we saw how many alleys have been paved in, what, the past 10, 20 years? What is it, 2 blocks? If we're scared of the number of residents on those 2 blocks tanking this whole referendum, I'm not sure that we're looking at it the right way.
But it's not just the 2 blocks, it's other blocks that have been done, and the people that don't actually have alleys, and, I mean, I know you're on social media also, you've seen the comments that I'm not gonna pay for someone else's alley, I don't have an alley, I've already paid for my own. So it might not be a huge number, but it is a number, and if the big eye on the prize is to get the funds available, we're having the discussion, but I think it clearly is, there will be people that will vote against it if it's specifically for, and it's an undefined program, and it has to be sort of an undefined program. I think it hurts the big picture, but that's for the majority of the board to decide, so.
You ready to talk?
I'm just gathering my thoughts. No, I hear a Trustee Hendrick's point in terms of being as clear as possible with residents. And I think the question about parity, I paid for my own alley, it's in great shape, so why should other people get alleys for free? It is a consideration, but I think we should be thinking about, like, what is the best policy for the village moving forward, and if this is a priority for us, what's the best way to fund it and manage it? In which case, the cost share option and what we are asking residents to go through in terms of organizing their residence it's a burden, and I believe it's a real part of why so few alleys have been paved over the last several years. So even if we increase the cost share and maintain that process, I think we will not make. I worry that we won't make the pace of progress that we would like to see. So I see the benefit to simplifying the program. We're seeding the program and attacking these future questions as the program grows.
So, I think you were pretty clear in what you said, but so what's your I'm trying to build a consensus. What's the recommendation? Do we include any alley program language in the education, or do we not? I guess that's that's the question we're trying to resolve now. Is I think I'm hearing everyone on the board say right now people sitting on this board would like to spend any available revenue beyond the street program that we need to maintain the streets into an alley program. But do we want to include that language in the education campaign? That's what,
Does this go in November or April? November, right?
November.
I mean, I think it's already been in the landmark enough that it's already been educated, or it's already out there. It's not like it's already been covered.
This meeting is public right now.
It's already, we're already talking about it. So I think, it'd be backpedaling at this point to not include it. It's already out there, and people are going to keep asking if it is in there still. I just was asking, I'm in support of the 100% coverage. I'm in support of that, of spending the funds in that way. I just was unclear about whether it would help or hurt the campaign, and
that's, you're looking at it the right way, but the question is, will it help or hurt? That's why you guys get paid.
I
the
think
big
at this
bucks to
point
make the
it's been.
decision
I think
about-
at this point it's been out there, and so it might hurt it to remove it.
I think
so.
to President Garvey's point is if you educate about the benefits of the alleys for the whole community, because I did hear from residents who have paid for their alleys and are concerned about, even though it's neutral, paying for other people's alleys. And my block is one of those blocks, but I think if you can include that in your education campaign, maybe that can mitigate some of those concerns.
I think the 50/50 program also has made a lot of neighbors not like each other over time too.
Not a
because,
good policy goal.
You know, it's.
That's a good
it-
policy.
It's, you know, it's created,
be.
you know, when
Friction,
the vote
yeah.
doesn't come through and that hasn't come to fruition, that's made neighbors, like, it's created fights on blocks. So I don't want to keep doing that. And I think the other option just continues that process, which is
I
not
think,
fair and is not very friendly.
no, and the 100% village covering it, it's easier, it's less costly. We have to expect our residents to look into that as to what an alley costs. So they're getting $800,000 a year. There's this many alleys. Okay, it'll be 50 years from now that
Yeah.
I'll be on. So that's what we're educating about. That in 50 years you're going to get your alley done as part of this. My thought is, at best, we have to focus on this is revenue neutral and explain that part.
And-
We
and
have
I-
to do that.
And I think the message would be that, to your point, and we've talked a little bit about this already, is we're just gonna develop an alley program. That's it. And
Yeah.
and not,
Yes.
not tied to a year, because we don't know the year, because if we get other funding sources, that 100 years could turn into a much less, just be silent about that.
Right.
We will create an alley program.
Absolutely, and I would
Right.
agree with that. If we want to put out too much detail on it, how transparent do you want to be? In 50 years, your alley be done? That's going to get us to sell this? I don't think so.
And that's not even transparent because there's a lot of skepticism,
Right.
like well, there's guessing that's built into that estimate, right? Our goal, everybody's goal would be to speed up that timeline by identifying additional revenue sources. So, I mean, this is what you were raising earlier, Trustee Ketchmark. My preference would be, at this point, to include the alley program as, you know, this money's going to be going to roads and alleys and not go into much more detail onto and it's not because we're holding anything back, it's because we don't yet have enough information to be able to provide a precise timeline. But I also heard from Stevie and others that there is a sufficient level of detail that we feel needs to be included as part of that education campaign for it to be helpful. So, I mean, I guess does staff feel like a high-level description? This is going to go to infrastructure and alleys is enough, or are you asking for more specific guidance from us in terms of the structure of that future alley program?
I think, Derek, you said at the last meeting, you talked at the last meeting about how it was important to have answers to some of these questions if we're going to be talking about alleys and the referendum question. Did you not?
Julie wants to.
Call me up.
Yes,
I'm waiting
thank
to
you.
go. Just kidding. I did, but not an expert on the referendum, but yeah, I think it would be hard to go to these public education events at the farmer's market and when they ask you, well, how are we gonna finance it to have a share? Do we lose the message? But I'll tell you, I've heard over the last week, maybe some different discussions from staff. From what I'm hearing, it's just, what's the best sell to the residents, right? Because if this doesn't pass, then the discussions are moot. So what's the best sell to the residents? And it seems like the financing method of the alleys is, I'm not sure the board's all in consensus, and I think it can be confusing. So the option I'm hearing kind of bannered about is maybe either you go out and say this is for roadway and we have 800,000 for other capital infrastructure, and if you want to say alleys or alleys and other needs, that's one option. Or you go out and you start talking about the financing of the alleys. That seems to be the discussion for the board right now, is whether how much specificity we put out with the educational campaign.
And Derek, I think that's a good, and you're doing my job for me, kind of summarizing. I mean, actually, I guess there's three options for the board. Is anyone on the board in favor of saying, don't mention the word alleys in any education campaign or anything, just saying we're asking for increase the limiting rates so we can do streets and not mention alleys? Is there anyone in favor of that at all? No. The middle ground would be, are people in favor of somewhat what Trustee Ketchmark suggested of saying, you know, streets and alleys without defining it? The third option is then, you almost have to have a fully defined, explained program that we're able to sell it's not fair to send staff, and we're gonna be out there answering questions also. Send people out to the farmers markets and the doorsteps to say, okay, here's how the alley program is gonna work going forward. And realistically, we are, the end of July right now, and the question's gonna be on the November ballot with early voting. We can, are we going to be able to create a definable, definite alley program that this board will commit to, knowing that in April, there'll be different there will be different board members up here. Those are the two left, I guess. Do you want to just mention alleys, streets and alleys in general, with the promise that we're going to have public meetings and discuss it going further, which we will do? Or do we want to nail down the specificity of this is what the program's going to be in the next week or month and go from there?
I feel like Trustee Whitehead had asked a question of staff that didn't get answered as to what the recommendation would be at that point.
About the
About the
100%?
level of specificity.
I think, yeah, Derek summarized that. I mean, and maybe there's not an answer to that question, but is there a level of I think mostly we're asking about, do we feel like that we need to answer the cost share question if we're going to include alleys as part of a public education campaign? I mean, that's the next big question, right? If you were to get more specific, that's the first thing you would get more specific on. Are we asking neighbors to pay in or not, right?
It sounds like most everyone is in favor of 100% though.
Mhm.
Is that wrong?
That may be, I wanted to give staff a chance to answer the question as to how
Yeah.
specific you think
I
we
mean,
need to be.
That's what I was hearing, is that everyone is in consensus of the 100% funding. It's just, what does that then mean for prioritization of people's alleys? And I think that's the part that isn't figured out or defined, and so that'd be a hard question to answer. But I think what Tim, you were saying is that it would start seeding a fund we could find matching dollars for, so we don't know how fast or how long that would take to do. Can we make that into something specific sounding?
Well, I mean, I think, I'll let Tim answer, but it would be whatever the board wants them to do in terms of how specific we want to be about the program
Right.
and how we want to define the program.
We would, the messaging would be, we are going to create, if the referendum passes, a road improvement program and an alley program. We'll strategize as to how specific we get with what that alley program will be, but it will be 100% funded by the village. We will determine the other issues as it evolves, and come back to the board with further discussions on it.
But is that the middle ground in the options, kind of Trustee Ketchert, do we, or no?
No, that's more like number 3.
Right, that's,
I think village will fund it 100%. Great idea. When does my alley get done? How come their alley's getting done before me? How many years? 50 years? The village is paying, village paying for all of it's great. But I think if we're gonna say the village is paying for all of it, you need more detail. And when you get into the detail, gee.
Seed program, that is the point by calling it a seed program. It is the start. We can't tell you with any specificity how long.
That's why we go with option 2. That's why you go with option 2.
And
I
option
think
2, you're saying
option-
you
yeah.
attack the cost share question at a
Yes.
future date, is what you're saying.
Right, this is for streets and alleys. We're asking for this limiting rate increase to fund streets and alleys going forward.
Yeah.
But that means one.
Programs still require me to pay.
Right, I think we're talking about number 2, and you're talking about number 1.
No, I'm
No.
saying that we would mention that alleys are part of this. And,
Right,
it's a
that's
seed
one.
program, absolutely. We
no,
would
well,
start
I think my 3 options of don't mention alleys at all in the education campaign. I think Trustee Ketchmark is going on my 3 as opposed to this 3. My 3 were, don't mention alleys at all in any education campaign, or my option 2 was Trustee Ketchmark's original point of, you say, we are looking for money, it's going to be used for streets and to seed an alley program, and kind of leave it at that, there'll be future discussions on that. And then my option 3 was the full-blown detail, it's 100%, this is the process, this is where it's gonna be. That was my option 3. Am I right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I think we were talking about 2 different options.
So this is option 2, but is it also relevant to
It's not-
education option 2, level 2? On the previous side, there's education level 2.
This is right here, level
Right,
2.
level
That's
2.
what I think everyone can agree
So
on.
this
And then
one is
option 2?
specifically for an education campaign. How much do we give, how little do we give? The recommendation is we give enough that a voter feels comfortable making a decision. And just saying we're gonna do alleys is not enough. Because the next question the voter is going to ask is, well, am I still gonna be expected to pay for that, or are you guys gonna pay for it? That is base what we're trying to answer as part of an education. The questions that come after that, greater detail and prioritization and how will it be developed in, that is the next step that will have to have continual conversations, but only if the board is comfortable in consensus saying, for a seed program, which I think fairly, but this is for the financial advisors, 5 to 10 years is enough to determine if we can continue that, or identify alternative funding within that time frame that bolsters the program. Similar to IEPA, no interest loan funding. We got a state mandate that was almost $30 million, completely unobtainable, and there was a funding mechanism that opened up that allowed us to go after it.
But is there a scenario where we could, and again, I screwed things up by having my 3 options versus the other, let's call mine A, B, and C. The option B of saying, the board is in favor of, they would use this money for streets and alleys, seeing an alley program, which the current board is leaning towards 100% funding at the, but Steve, where I disagree with you, but I mean, if they're not gonna just be satisfied with the question, are they gonna have to contribute or not contribute? If they're asking those questions, they are literally gonna wanna know what year is my alley gonna get done and what's the priority choice.
Yeah, but we won't have the answer.
I know we won't, so that's why I
And we
don't.
won't.
State that in
Yeah.
an education campaign.
Yeah.
Here's what we have, here's what we know factually to give you enough information about. Everything else, the next questions, we can't answer because we don't wanna mislead you.
Right, we haven't voted on it yet.
Yeah, we don't even know if we
But
have any.
in reality, we couldn't even say that, it's gonna be a 100% funding program, because we haven't voted on the 100%
Well,
voting.
right, and we won't be
plan.
able to tell them which street's getting done the soonest
Right.
either.
Yeah.
Right, which I'm not convinced that we need, I also am leaning towards 100%, but I'm not convinced that we need to answer the cost share question for the purposes of this education campaign. I understand that it will definitely raise additional questions, and one of them will be cost share. But cost share is one of many others that we're not answering. So I think saying we as a board are gonna work with staff and the village to develop the program if this funding were approved, and we wanna hear your feedback on the cost share question and all the other questions. That seems like a reasonable approach, and also the most clear and honest approach based on the information we have right now.
And meanwhile, we're seeding the program with that funding.
Right, and it's revenue neutral.
Right.
We're giving you an option where we can start, we continue street improvements, we can begin an alley program, and it's revenue neutral right now by approving this limiting rate increase. That's the question that has to pass. If that doesn't pass, the rest of this doesn't matter at all. And throwing this other in, I think could really affect that passing. But I think focusing on the revenue neutral, and it can lead to these other things, that's our biggest sell here.
Where are we at in timeframe in terms of making a decision on that? I mean, because Trustee Gahuli's not here, she's out of town for business tonight, and I don't even think she was able to listen in tonight, so.
We have a November 3rd ballot question, and we have draft education communication just waiting to get posted following tonight's meeting. We would like to give a comprehensive and thorough education campaign, so as soon as possible. Tomorrow is when we intended to start pushing out and posting education components. So
Including funding of alley programs and the level of funding and everything else, I mean,
that was depending on this
Yeah.
discussion, we had some things
right.
primed up. But if we're saying
And maybe in 2 weeks, it'll be clearer, and I mean, Trustee Gahuli, because it's, I mean, every decision we make is important. This is, you know, I'd like to have Trustee Gahuli's input on it, then
Well,
with 2 more weeks.
did she weigh in at the last meeting? I mean, what was her, I know I wasn't here last time, so we pushed it again for me, so I don't want to
Well, no,
keep pushing it down the road.
We
if
didn't
we've-
get to this level of, because staff did a great job of answering. I mean, there was a lot of us, including me, that weren't familiar with the special assessment process and Stevie's work with the GIS to figure out, you know, those were the questions we had. We never got to that level of saying 100%, 50%, even an alley funding program. We didn't get into options 1, 2, or 3, A, B, and C, so it's not like Trustee Gahuli got a chance to weigh in on that.
Okay. I mean, maybe I'm mishearing, but I didn't hear anyone say they wanted the 50% option. I'm hearing 100%, and it's just about how we describe it. Is that right?
I think last meeting, actually, our discussion, most of our support was for 50/50.
Yes.
Oh, really?
But I
Yeah.
changed.
But
I changed my perspective on that too.
I wasn't here,
And,
but I was also
and
there
my
when it was
understanding
Right.
is Trustee
All the-
Ketchmark is still in that camp.
You know, it was the discussion as we talked about the special assessment process and the additional cost and how crazy that gets, and it gets people not, right, but I think we were all for the 50/50, you know, that time, or most of us were.
Because it was faster, it sped up the timeline,
Right.
that type of thing, so.
Yeah.
So, I don't think Trustee Gahuli was, you know, and, I don't know.
So am I correct in understanding, in order to go forward at this point with the education plan that you had, including the alleys, we need to have the 50/50 versus 100 question answered?
If we were to include alleys in this education, the recommendation is you define consensus if it's 100% village paid for, or if there will be a resident contribution.
And is everyone prepared to make a decision on that in terms of tonight, or, I mean, Trustee Whitehead, you said, you said you still weren't sure, but, you know, if it has to be made tonight as opposed to 2 weeks from now, if we can't start the education campaign in general, and be fair with our, and I know staff does a great job of planning out the whole education campaign going forward, but starting the initial work of getting the word out, that I would think everyone would be fair if we said, staff put out things that said it will be for streets and alleys, and then I know staff could come up with a language that we're refining and continue to discuss the options, but I don't want to pin you guys down, and without Trustee, I mean, if I start counting votes and see what the votes are, if Trustee Gahuli's vote matters or not, so.
I understand the staff recommendation. It seems like there's some of us on the board who would be in favor of including the high-level alley explanation and not providing more specificity on the cost share question.
Wait, I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So the option B of your options, President Garvey, which were this money's going to go to streets and alleys. The questions about timeline and cost to the homeowner and the village are going to be addressed at a future date if this referendum were improved, and will incorporate public input from you and your neighbors and all residents in the community.
Could you talk about the education campaign a little bit, what that is? I mean, are we posting something online? Are we doing mailings? Are we having informational meetings?
That's a great question, Trustee. So as a refresher, for everyone who is listening here and at home, we do have, as part of the public education materials, I hesitate using the word campaign because that almost insinuates that we are looking for a specific outcome with it, but we will be having a series of community events. We are working with some community partners to have 2 pop-up events. You may hear the term tabling, to join residents where they are out in the community. So we've potentially identified the Farmers Market or the Creative Arts Festival, which is coming in the fall. We do have the comprehensive webpage that we will be updating with whatever the board decides. And I want to reiterate, we don't want to walk anything back, but we can build upon the conversations that you are having tonight. So that doesn't preclude including the information about it being tax neutral, these important things that Trustee you and your fellow trustees have reiterated tonight. We can start with that and build upon it if the board wants to have more conversation. So I mentioned the 2 pop-up or tabling events. We'll have website material, 3 social media message or as needed as we're coming up to the general election. And then we're going to have a mailer going to everyone's home in the month leading up to the referendum question to, just as we said, further explain what we're asking residents to vote on, because it is a comprehensive question. And then trying to think of anything else. I think that covers it for the main
Is
part.
that
but-
month before, I mean, and we talk about this at different levels. I mean, early voting happens early. I mean, in a lot of voting, this is an early voting site, so a lot of our residents start, I mean, I don't know how many weeks before they start using this, if it's planned to be used for the November election. You know, we've talked about this with local campaigns, you know, used to be you'd get something out the week or 2 before to try and make the final push, but a lot of people come out because it's so convenient to vote here. Does that change the strategy on the timing of the mailings and the materials?
That's a very good point, President Garvey. We had planned having some buffer time for the informational, more comprehensive packet that we could double check with the county to see when early voting would start to make sure that we're not missing any voters that way. And then our last mailer would be for the more traditional in-person voters, saying, you know, we can't encourage them to make a certain decision, but to remind them, hey, this is your precinct, this is how you find your voting spot. So that one would not necessarily change, but we could shift up that informational mailer. And we also, I'd be remiss to say if we wouldn't have another round of educational materials in the Brookfielder. I know we have the fall edition that will be coming out sometime this fall.
And I don't even know that we're committed to having the early vote. We've had early voting here for quite a while. It's a very popular site, not just for Brookfield residents, for neighboring communities, but I do think there's a substantial turnout ahead of time here at the Village Hall, so I just wanted to put that out there.
Yes, thank you for that. I like to vote early myself, so.
All right, looking for,
I appreciate the idea that we can build on the message, and maybe that is the strategy, especially since Trustee Gilhooly isn't here. It does feel abrupt to make such a big decision as to how we're funding things in one meeting. I mean, I know we did talk about it last meeting, but if we can give it another 2 weeks to make that decision, I think that might benefit.
Trustee, what we do recommend including as part of the public education materials is references to all of the many times you folks have had these public discussions. And so the resident, I don't want to pretend to be a resident, although I would love to be, it shows that you have had thoughtful conversations about this starting from last fall. And that shows that it's not a rush decision. It is something that you can, you know, it is an iterative process. So I think you have that historical context that you can point to as part of that as well.
and does everyone right now have availability for the first meeting? I think it's August 13th. So, and I mean, and things happen, I mean, life happens and things happens, but right, I mean, I think we have a full, I know Trustee Gilhooly will be diligent and listen to this meeting and talk to public, talk to other board members individually, one-on-one, that type of thing, to get input. And then, you know, I see us moving in a specific direction. I think I really want to be able to give staff very clear direction. I think staff might be able to read tea leaves that we're going a certain way, but in terms of pinning it down, in terms of what we're actually going to do, that option B or C or 2 or 3 or however you want to say it, I mean, I think we have to be prepared to answer that by the next meeting, so. Is there
any other information that you would like us
question.
to come back to you with in 2 weeks?
That's a good question. I mean, if there's something that you think of in the interim.
I mean, I guess for the 100% coverage program, like, you know, what additional education components would need to go with that? If we're not able to share, you know, we're not going to have a fully determined this many years or this many whatever, but think the piece where people are gonna ask, am I gonna have to pay more or not, we just need to decide that at the next meeting, so it sounds like that's where we're not clear, right? And, right. Right,
Yeah,
and I mean, in either case, where there's a contribution or not, it's a very long process, so trying to get into talking about the amount of years seems not helpful to the education campaign, so. Right, I agree. Sure.
And I mean, here, we're debating option 1 versus option 2, but the chances are in education materials, you're not gonna take time in the education materials saying why the board chose option 2 so much over option 1, go through all that, because it's just more information. But one of the big benefits of option 2 is the 100% funding is, and I mean, I know the estimated savings is $19 million due to reduction in the program. Eliminating the special assessment process means $19 million more is going into the actual alleys as opposed to the bound council and other things that you go through this with the special assessment. So that would be, part of it, that's part of the future discussions. But I realize the education campaign is so important, so stay tuned for 2 weeks, and and this material tonight's the GIS and information and all those things, and I mean, I've been on the board forever, and the refresher on the special assessment process and the numbers and how long it's been and when Green Alley started has been really helpful to me, and I'm sure it's been helpful to the board to have that information, so. Okay, 2 weeks? All right, thank you, everyone, thank you for all the time. That's all we have on the agenda for tonight then. Is there any public comment on this side? Derek, you got anything to say? Lauren, you want to say anything back there? No? Is there a need for executive session, Tim? Stevie, is there a need for executive session? Thanks. So at 8:52 PM, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by trustee Kaluzny, second by trustee Hendricks. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark.
Aye.
Trustee Whitehead.
Aye.
Trustee Hendricks.
Aye.
Trustee Naramatsu.
Aye.
Trustee Kaluzny.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We're adjourned at